Welcome to the BartenderHQ.com podcast with me, your host, David Eden-Sangwell, and on this week's show, we are talking tequila production. Okay, so on this week's show, we're going to be talking about the different styles of production that are involved in tequila. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the diffuser method that we've mentioned in a couple of the shows. We're going to talk a little bit more about what an autoclave is and the difference that brick oven makes in terms of the drink that we get out at the far end. We're also going to talk about distillation in general, because I don't think we've actually covered distillation and how alcohol is fermented from sugars and then distilled to make it stronger yet on the podcast. So we are going to get into that. But first and foremost, it's time for industry news. The latest industry news from BartenderHQ. Now, I, for one, am, as you have probably guessed from previous episodes of the show and also the Booze and Bizinger stuff that we do from time to time, a huge comic book movie fan and a huge fan of the comic books themselves. And Ryan Reynolds has recently entered the drinks industry, buying up Aviation Gin over in the US. I believe he's now creative director, one of the key stakeholders, maybe a complete owner. But in between playing Toon Blast, which has been advertising super heavily on social media, and you probably will not have avoided the little video adverts that he's got for this game. He's been on Jimmy Fallon's show this week in the States talking about it and talking about how hardcore the liquor industry is, and how it's basically just as hard as being in the movie business, which is pretty crazy, to be honest. It's really cool to think you got someone like Deadpool that's out in the US, especially championing gin, which is really, really nice as well, because I know from speaking to other guys over in the States, like when we talked to John Bandy a few weeks ago, that gin is not the drink that it is here in the UK, in America. I know in the States, whiskey is a huge thing, huge deal, and I think it's vodka and then tequila and then sort of whiskey and then gin is way back at the end there, but it's catching up, and I think having someone like Ryan Reynolds on board is really going to make a difference. Turns out his first time trying Aviation was in the best Negroni he'd ever had. So Negronis, guys, it's all about the Negronis, and you guys out in the States, you're missing out if you're not enjoying the gin and tonics quite in the same way that we do here in the UK. Also in the news this week, in news that surprises absolutely no one, mixing energy drinks and alcohol increases risky behaviours. That's, yep, I think we all kind of saw that one coming. Vodka Red Bull is not the best combination, does not have the best outcomes for humans. VK has created a watermelon ready-to-drink after a flavour search. Now, I'm sure in the past they have probably had watermelon in the past. I know Bacardi Breezes did back in the day, and I think that's one of the few that's still available as well. But answer me this, if you guys want to get in touch, hit us up on Twitter. Is there still a place in our society for these kind of ready-to-drinks, these Alco Pops, these... I guess you could call them pre-mixed cocktails. I mean, Eden Mill, that I've been working with in my previous job, certainly had their mixology project, which came in these really, really nice aluminium bottles, and they taste really good, and they're kind of a classy alternative. They're bottled at 8%, but is it actually still a market that people want to fill, or have we kind of got to the point where enough bars can now just make a basic cocktail that we don't even need them anymore? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one. And just before we finish off, London Rum Week is to launch this October. Now, London has had a tequila festival in the past. It's got London Cocktail Weekend, London Cocktail Week, I believe it is, in fact. And now we're going to have rum as well. So, obviously, we like rum, and it's not something that we've really featured heavily on the show so far. So, let me know if you want us to do a rum month coming up. I think we're going to be doing a lot of stuff in September that is towards social media side of things, which will be really fun. And also, at that time of the year, if you are helping out with social media for your bar, or if no one is and you want to be, that is the time of year that you need to do a really big push to get everyone in ready for Christmas. People at this time of year have already started booking Christmas parties and things like that. So get on that, and if you want some help, we will have it coming up in September. Social September.
The Catch Up on BartenderHQ.
So this week on BartenderHQ, we obviously, our last podcast was with Jen from Casa Agave. It was a fantastic show, really good to have her on, and really kind of deep dive into some of the products that they've got available. We followed that up with a Matador cocktail recipe, which is it's actually a margarita, but it's sweetened with pineapple instead of liqueurs or agave. Then we stepped away from the agave month a little bit, and I did a cocktail to celebrate the launch of the Gary V K-Swiss Clouds and Dirt trainers. It's a collaboration that he's done. I had the previous ones. I put a video up on YouTube. I will link to it in the show notes. But essentially we made a variation on a New York sour, but using a base of Belarusian vodka, because Gary V himself, if you've not heard of him, I bang on about him all the time on the podcast, so you must look him up. Grab yourselves a copy of Crushing It, his book. It's very, very worth having a read. And then yesterday we had the Mexican Pornstar cocktail. So we've basically done a Mexican twist on the Pornstar Martini. So passion fruit, vanilla, a lovely tequila, which I think we used one of Jen's, and a little shot of bubbles on the side. Very, very nice. The tequila actually gives it a lot more complexity than you get with a vodka. Coming up on this week's Bartender HQ, I am on my way today down to the Roadhouse in London. It is the UK Flair Finals, so I will be down there covering that. There will be some stuff going up on the Instagram account from there, which will be awesome. So I'll get some clips up there. I will probably try and grab as many bartenders as I can for a quick chat as well. I would like to do some more Flair stuff. I keep saying it. It's actually going to happen. We're going to talk a lot more Flair. I think enough people were loving our chat with JB Bandy that you will tolerate Flair. So we're going to do it, and we're going to have the videos and stuff. So that'll be cool. And then on Monday this week, I'm actually going to be attending a judges workshop. So kind of learning to be a Flair judge with the WFA, and a bit of a kind of, I'm not sure if it's a seminar or if it's a training day or exactly what it is, but I will be in London and I will be doing it. So you will find out exactly what we are up to, and hopefully that will be pretty cool for us as well.
The main course.
So onto the main event, we are talking about how tequila is produced. We're going to start off with a real quick primer on just alcohol production in general. So in order to produce our spirits, we need to start off with alcohol, and fermentation is how we do that. So what we need to do in the first place is find something that has starches or sugars, and if it's starches, we need to convert it into sugars. Sometimes it's through use of different enzymes. In other cases, it is through a cooking process. Other times it's malting, things like that. That is all the process that turns starches, which is a great way for plants to store energy and carbohydrates, essentially, into sugars, which we can use to have yeast basically eat up and spit out carbon dioxide and alcohol. So that's the first stage. The alcoholic soup that we get from whatever fermentation that we do will only be up to maybe 10 to 12 to top end 15-16% alcohol. So we need to concentrate the alcohol down. That is where distillation comes in. Now distillation is essentially, it takes advantage of the fact that different liquids boil and evaporate at different temperatures. Alcohol, ethanol, which is the alcohol that we can drink without going blind and without causing ourselves all sorts of even worse health problems, boils and evaporates at 78 degrees, and obviously water evaporates at 100 degrees. We're talking Celsius here because I'm not in the United States, and they're the only ones that use that weird Fahrenheit in any kind of meaningful way. So 100 degrees C, you've got water evaporating. A little bit lower than that, you've got your alcohol evaporating. So what we're trying to do is control that temperature so that mainly alcohol is evaporating out from our mixture and leaving behind all of the crap that we don't want. So in this huge tub, we heat it up, we capture the steam that comes out of the top, and we cool that down so that it condenses back into a liquid, and what we get out of that tube that the liquid comes out of is much stronger alcohol. It's still got some other things in there, but it is a lot purer than it was when we started off. We would have started off at about 10 to 12 to 15% alcohol, as I say, At the end of the first distillation, we're probably talking somewhere around 60% alcohol by volume in what comes out. You do a second distillation, you'll get it even higher, and through pot distillations, you can generally get it up to about 80%, I believe. Now, I'm not a distiller, so this is not something I've done. That is my understanding of how it works. Now, you can also use column stills. Column stills are essentially a huge, and I mean huge, tall column of plates which act as individual little stills, and you will have stuff going upwards with steam and condensing and then coming back down, so you're actually getting a lot of distillations going on in that one column in one go. Also, you can use this for fractional distillation, so you can actually only take out the stuff right at the top, which is going to be the most pure alcohols, if that's what we're looking for. Hopefully that makes some sort of sense. I will try and throw some graphics on the screen in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast, or on the screen if you're looking at the video version that I do of this podcast as well. So that should all make a little bit more sense. Now, for the creation of tequila, which is what we're talking about particularly on this show, the source of our sugars is agave. So for tequila, it's the Blue Weber agave. We won't bother talking about what goes into mixtos, but essentially that you can chuck some other stuff in there that's essentially a vodka for 49% of your alcohol. In terms though of what we're talking about, the traditional way is that you take the piñas, which are these huge plants which can get up to sort of twice a human's height, according to Jen, who's been over there and seen them. They lop off, the humidors will go out into the fields, they will lop off these really sharp leaves, these pointed leaves, which are the succulents, and bring back the hearts of the piñas, so they come back looking basically like a shaved pineapple. They get cooked as a whole piña, then they get crushed, and then they kind of extract the juices from it, this cooked juice from the piñas. Okay, so then they can be cooked, whether they get cooked in either a brick oven, which is the most traditional way. There's a kind of middle ground, which is autoclaves, which is a big steam pressure cooker. Big kind of metal tubes generally, or the most modern way is these diffusers. Now, the difference with the diffusers is that they don't follow the same process that the autoclaves and the brick ovens do in terms of cooking the agave first and then extracting the juices from the cooked agave. The diffusers will basically shred the agave into kind of mulch, and then they will either squeeze that to get the juice out and then cook just the juice, or they will use actually use acids to essentially chemically cook the juice, which is also going to strip out a lot of the flavors that you would be looking for from an agave, and kind of it makes it a little bit pointless in using agave to make the spirit that comes out the other end, because you're not going to have a lot of that agave kind of character left in the distillate that you get out at the end, if that makes sense. These diffuser machines, by the way, are about the size of a basketball court. They're huge things, and essentially whole piñas go into one end, and out of the other end you get your cooked agave juice that you can then ferment and distill from what you get out of that, as I understand it. Now, these diffusers are actually quite secretive in general. We have mentioned them in passing before. Sauser has actually got quite a good amount of information on their website about it, because they are one of the big tequila producers that use these diffuser machines to create their product, and they're honest about it. Now, there are a lot of other tequila producers that are not necessarily going to be as honest, because these machines are more there to make the bottom line better for the companies than focusing on the flavors and the product that is produced using these machines. So this is why it's not something that is shouted about from the rooftops very often. This is why Sauser is such an exception in this field, in that they are actually talking about the fact that they do this. There's a lot of other products out there that use this kind of juice, and they keep it absolutely secret. They will not tell people about it, and it's something that they want to keep as quiet as possible, because quite often with these diffuser-made tequilas, they actually have to add, at the end of the process, some flavouring, some agave flavouring, so that it actually tastes like tequila again, and rather than more like a vodka. A lot of the producers that use the diffusers as well will also use these column stills, which really gets the liquid up to a super high ABV, so you can get up to sort of 97-98% ABV in these things, which is what you then call a highly rectified spirit, which is essentially what you cut with water to make vodka. Whereas when you're using the pot stills or the copper stills, the alembic stills, you're not getting up to such a high level, so you're not removing as much of the other ingredients, the other chemicals that make up the agave ferment. The pulque, I believe, is what Jen called it on the show that we were talking about. They don't remove as much of those other chemicals, which is what keeps the character to the drink. With a vodka, you're trying to remove as much character as possible in most circumstances. There are certain vodkas, obviously, that do talk a lot more about the fact that they use certain copper pot stills, and that things like Kettle One, where you've actually got a lot of that kind of coppery metallic flavour to the vodka, which is desired. But in general, vodkas are trying to be as neutral as possible, if that makes sense. So it's as plain of a spirit as you can make, in order that you can mix it with absolutely anything and not have to worry about it. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of the process of a diffuser, and as opposed to the process of regular tequila production using autoclaves or brick ovens. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I'm going to round it off there. It is going to be a much shorter podcast today, and this is purely because I have got to be up early in the morning. I've got the kids overnight because my wife's out working at the club. So I'm going to be up probably a couple of times during the night, and I need to get everything sorted for tomorrow for getting down to Roadhouse. But if you are listening to this on Sunday when it goes out, jump over to our Instagram account, which is Instagram.com/BartenderHQ Pics, or just search BartenderHQ Pics on Instagram. You will find us, and follow along, because I think we're going to do a story tomorrow of our adventure, our trip down to London. I'm leaving Birmingham about 3 p.m, so look out for that. That's going to be UK time, obviously, which is GMT +1 at the moment, because we are in the summer. Until then, guys, hit up our Instagram, shoot me any messages that you want to on Twitter, and let me know about that question that I asked you earlier that I've now forgotten. I'll see you on next week's show.